Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Perlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Perlman.
Hello. For the next half hour, we are going to be talking about forensic anthropology, especially as a theme in a novel, and how to tackle animal cruelty. With my guest, Kathy Reichs. She is an author of over 24 novels. She was formerly a producer for the Fox Television's longest-running scripted drama, Bones. She is a forensic anthropologist certified by the American Board of Forensic Anthropology. Her first novel won the Ellis Award for Best First Novel and was an international bestseller. But we're going to be talking about her most recent book, Evil Bones, a Temperance Brennan novel. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Normally, I read nonfiction environmental books, but I must say your novel was easy reading, a thrilling reading, was quite suspenseful. Every chapter seemed to be bringing up new characters, new situations. So enjoyable. Because I'm an anthropologist, I was curious and interested in how you were incorporating forensic anthropology into your novel. But before we talk about some of the themes in the book, you need to define forensic anthropology.
Forensic anything, forensic chemistry, forensic pathology, forensic anthropology, psychology, means anything that might end up in court. So we tend to be specialists in our areas and work for forensic anthropologists, at least, for coroner, medical examiners, and sometimes for attorneys, because it will have legal ramifications.
I focused on cultural anthropology, traditions, customs, but forensics is more in the field of physical anthropology because you are looking at bones. You can tell the difference between human bones and animal bones? How?
Because of just basic anatomy, because different creatures, including humans, move in different ways. We all have basically the same skeleton with the same package of bones, but it's modified for different kinds of movement. A four-legged creature is not built the same as a two-legged creature, or a creature that flies is not built the same as a creature that hops. So by looking at the skeleton, so that's what we look at, the bones of the skeleton. And in humans, the bones can tell us a lot of different things. They can tell us how old the person was when they died. They can tell us something about their ancestral background. They can tell us the gender of the person that died. So there's a lot of information, medical history, that we can derive from the bones. I address two kinds of cases. One is these bones were found in a shallow grave, washed up out of a river, whatever, and we have no idea who it is. The other type case would be these were found in, a shallow grave in grandma's basement, and we think it's grandpa. We think it's John Doe. So those are the two kinds of questions that I would get.
You are also able to determine how old the bones are, whether or not you found bones where somebody died a day or two ago, or a week or two, a month, years, centuries. How do you determine that?
Skeletonization can take place as quickly as 2 weeks. So if it was someone who died yesterday or 2 or 3 days ago, you're probably going to have a fresh body. And that would go to the pathologist for a normal autopsy, the kind of thing you imagine where they make a Y incision and pull out the liver and the spleen and that kind of thing. I get cases in which, as a forensic anthropologist, in which the body is compromised. It's maybe burned or mummified or mutilated or dismembered, or it's decomposed. And then we can't rely on the kind of indicators you would rely on with soft tissue. So you have to get any information you have about the person or their cause or manner of death from the bones.
You used all your experience in the field. The lead character in your book, Evil Bones, she was a forensic anthropologist. You have many different characters in your novels, but your main character is Temperance Brennan. Where did you get that name from, and how did you name the other people?
That's fun for me, naming characters. I did a program called Semester at Sea decades ago. There was a student on board the ship called Tempe, and I thought, well, that's a good name. I like that. And I stored it away in my brain for when I wrote this book years and years later. But my character is a good Irish Catholic girl, so she needed a longer version. So Tempe became Temperance. And then because the Katie character is kind of based on my conglomerate conglomerate of my two daughters. I didn't want my son to feel left out, and his name is Brendan, so that's where the Brennan came from, so Temperance Brennan.
In your story, you were also incorporating another environmental concern, and that was of animal cruelty, because you described how she was finding and trying to describe animals that had been cruelly killed. Could you tell us how you are incorporating those various concerns in your novel?
Yeah, in each of the books, the ultimate goal is to tell a good story.
You did.
Well, thank you. I write murder mysteries. The difference is that the solution is driven in part, at least, by forensic science.
Your story has many elements of your anthropological work, the places that bones were found in natural areas and parks, but also your concern personally and by your main character for what's happening to animals and animal cruelty and how they are being killed in your novel. I don't want to say everything that goes on in your novel, but that definitely is a consistent theme throughout the book.
We've referred to the fact that someone is abusing animals and killing animals, and this is something that Tempe just feels passionately about. And of course, there's always the fear that when you've got a perpetrator who's doing that, displaying the remains, are they going to make that leap to humans? Are they going to become dissatisfied with just killing animals?
So how do you incorporate both your concern for animals, your knowledge of forensic anthropology, and having a great murder mystery or murder mysteries in your novel?
Well, I guess that's the trick. In each of the books, I do like to address a broader question than just having a murder mystery. Child pornography was a theme in one book. In this one, it's animals. It's cruelty or abuse of animals. So I do try to bring a theme like that. And it's something that is near and dear to my heart, and therefore it's something that is near and dear to Tempe Brennan's heart.
And that is the name of the main character throughout these novels that you've been writing.
Yes, Temperance Brennan. She's a forensic anthropologist. They say write about what you know about. So Tempe does what I do. She's a forensic anthropologist, and she works at the main medical legal lab in Montreal, doing all the work for the province of Quebec, and also for the coroner medical examiner in North Carolina. And she commutes kind of between those two places, which is what I've done, for like decades. Let's just leave it at that.
You mentioned your work in Canada and other places. Is it different working in another culture, another country like Canada, even using another language like French?
It's different in that way. All my work in Montreal is in French. When I started working at, it's called the Laboratoire de Sciences Judiciaires de Médecine Légale, the Laboratory of Forensic and Legal Medicine. When I started working there, I was the only English-speaking person in the whole building, I think. So it really forced me to improve my French, for one thing. The legal system's a little different, but not that different. People stand up in court instead of sitting down in court. They wear wigs and gowns. So there are differences, but doing the forensic work is not all that different.
You personally are concerned about the welfare of animals. What about the welfare of the trees and the plants?
Well, that too. That'll have to be a different book.
Always another story.
There you go.
You commute between North Carolina and South Carolina. Were the places that you described, Frog Pond and Weddington, real places in the Southeast?
Those are real places, and I know Frog Pond. I don't know some of the others, but of course all the information in the world is available on Google. So I pulled up a map of the Carolinas, and I found some towns and small cities with colorful names and decided to use those.
I don't want to tell the entire story because these mysteries, people should read the novel, and it seemed like every chapter you were developing new themes, bringing in new characters. Why don't you summarize what Evil Bones is all about?
Well, Evil Bones starts out with the discovery of animal remains, and it turns out that there have been a number of these animals that have been killed and displayed. That Tempe fears, as she looks back over earlier cases, that she hadn't put a lot of importance on because they were animals. But she notices that they're escalating in size, that the perpetrator, whoever's killing and displaying these animals, is moving from a rat to a squirrel to a rabbit and then ultimately to a dog. And the fear is, well, is this perpetrator going to become dissatisfied with that and make the leap to humans and begin killing humans?
You have her friend, a psychologist, who also advises her?
Yeah, in each book you have your core cast of characters. There's Temperance Brennan, and there's Andrew Ryan, and there's Skinny Slidell, and Luke Claudel on the Montreal. But in each book you also want to bring in new characters. So one of the characters I bring into this book is her old friend from, college I think it was, who is a psychologist. And does forensic psychology. So when Tempe decides she needs to go to the expert to find out what might be driving this perpetrator and what kind of personality profile this person might have, she contacts her old friend, Adina, who is a forensic psychologist.
But another character that you have in there is her great niece, who was described at one point sort of as an animal whisperer. Could you describe how some people can relate and understand animals better? Because you were talking about how she was able to think like the animal.
Yeah, I can't explain it. I think it's true. There are certain people that just have a mental capability to, maybe they get into the mind of the creature they're trying to connect with, but some people just have a much better rapport with animals than other people do. And her niece has incredible rapport with various species of animals.
There was a chapter where the detective, the investigator, your anthropological expert went to a taxidermy conference. Taxidermy is something where many hunters want to have their kill stuffed and displayed. Are there other purposes of taxidermy, or is that basically it?
Well, I did go out on the internet when I had the idea of, what did I call it, provocative taxidermy, where animals are stuffed and positioned in sexually provocative ways. So I thought, is that really a thing? And I went, sure enough, it is. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah, so I contacted some taxidermists, and they were unaware of provocative taxidermy, but gave me a lot of information about the field of taxidermy.
It was quite common in the past. How common is taxidermy now, and is there any use for it in the anthropological field when they find old specimens in various archaeological sites?
I think it would be more for museum people. As anthropologists, we don't do any taxidermy. We work with human remains, but we work with human remains that have been compromised or burned or mutilated or decomposed or whatever. So we just want to figure out mainly who they are and what was their manner and cause of death. We would not presume to stuff something and preserve it for a museum. There are those that do that. I think the most fascinating exhibit I've ever seen was the one, I think he was either Dutch or German, and it was called something like The Visible Man, where he did plasticine and sliced bodies that had been donated into thin sections so you could see exactly what was going on in the human body. It was fascinating. So there are people who do museum exhibits and would use taxidermy or taxidermy-like techniques, but anthropologists don't do that.
In your story, every few chapters, there was a new discovery of bones that had to be identified. But all of these were found in natural areas. Was there a reason you used the scenic parks, the natural nature reserves, rather than just have people find them on the sidewalk, on the lawns, on the urban street?
It was critical for constructing the psychological makeup of the doer, of the perpetrator, the person that was killing these animals or eventually perhaps might be moving on to killing humans. So he or she is not going to leave them in plain sight. And the point of it is to display them. And the point is to take pleasure from seeing people when they discover these bizarre displays.
Most of the activity was described in the natural areas and parks and homes, but one of the cities actually had some underground sewers that were seen in one of your chapters?
Yeah, that's in Charlotte. And I think I was at a dinner party or something, and people were talking about the fact that there's this whole network of underground tunnels under the city. And of course, I thought, whoa, that's great stuff. And they're very secretive about where the entrances are to these tunnels, and they've got water, and not a lot, but they've got, water kind of flowing through them. So I went and took a look. I didn't go very far in because they're pretty creepy, but I thought that's a great idea. I'm going to use that in a story.
Your book, Evil Bones, a Temperance Brennan novel, has a great storyline that you've continued in your novels. I want to talk more about your character, the novel, and your other work as a forensic anthropologist when we return in a moment with my guest, Kathy Reichs.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Kathy Reichs, author of over 24 novels, and her most recent book, Evil Bones, a Temperance Brennan novel. We've been discussing how in this thriller of a story, and it moved quickly. I couldn't really sleep one night. I wanted to keep reading and seeing what happened to the animals, to the people, to the characters. It definitely was a great read, particularly for somebody like myself who normally reads nonfiction, ecological reports and books. Explain the significance of the title, Evil Bones.
I started out with the idea evil. I read a book on evil and how it is defined differently by different societies and different cultures. And it made me start thinking about the question, well, what is evil? What is truly evil? Is there any universal that everyone everywhere in the world agrees is evil? So that was in the back of my mind as I'm constructing this. I think everybody can agree that murdering or mutilating children is evil. But where do we draw that line? What is truly, truly evil?
I would say killing animals is evil too.
And yet we kill them and eat them.
Some people do. It's time to become a vegetarian and vegan. There's another aspect of your book that you mentioned just basically almost in one sentence about scientists and believing in scientists and is science accurate. You're a scientist yourself, so explain your approach to what's going on, particularly in this current culture where so many people are refusing to take all the scientific studies and accept them. There's so many different false theories about science. How do you, as a scientist, say this is what we ought to believe?
As a scientist, I say this is what we ought to believe. This is what has been tested and proven. You don't really prove anything in science, but you subject it to a hypothesis and you test it and it meets, the criteria that you set up. So we have certain premises that we believe in science. It's hard for me to answer that. I do believe in the power of science. I don't think it should be abused, though, or I don't think you should rely on an area of expertise beyond what it's capable of doing. I think when people testify in court and get into trouble as an expert witness, it's because they overstep their own area, sometimes because they've been led by, opposing counsel or whatever. I do believe in the power of science if it's done correctly.
In your work as a forensic anthropologist, what was the most unusual situation that you found?
Oh my goodness, that's a hard one to answer. The cases I remember, I'm often asked, cases I remember are the ones that never got solved. That's one of the myths perpetrated by books, fiction, and television, is that every single case gets solved, and that's really not the case. So the ones that kind of nag at me, I guess you'd say, are the ones that are still sitting in boxes in the remains storage room at my lab.
It takes you about a year to write one of these novels?
Yeah, that's correct. To start thinking about it and then to do a little bit of outlining. I don't do much outlining. They talk about pantsers and plotters. I'm not a plotter. I don't outline a plot and then write it. I'm more of a seat-of-your-pants kind of writer. I'll outline the first 6 or 8 chapters of the book, and I'll know where it's going. I know how it's going to end, but then I just start writing and just sail into it.
Why did you start writing novels instead of writing more scientific reports about your work?
Well, I'd done so many of those. I did 3 textbooks, and I wanted to try something new. And I had a colleague who was writing fiction, an anthropologist, and she began writing romance novels and making a little tidy bit of money on the side. And I had 3 kids talking about going to private universities, which are very expensive, and I was earning a faculty salary. So I thought, okay, she's doing this. Maybe if I write what I do is interesting to people. Maybe if I write a good novel, someone will buy it, and that turned out to work for me.
You seem to like the term Bones because you had a TV drama named Bones. You have a book, Evil Bones.
That's called branding, as you know, I'm sure. It's branding, and your publisher or the people that are producing the TV series, they want to stick with something that the public will identify with, will know what it is.
Give us a hint before we read all your other novels about Temperance Brennan and where she was and what she did in the other novels.
She gets all over the place. A lot of the novels are set in the Carolinas, either North or South Carolina, and in Montreal or places in Quebec. But she gets around. I mean, she's been to the Northwest Territories up in Yellowknife. The reason for that is I went to a literary festival in Yellowknife, so I thought, okay, my character's going to go here. Or I go to Turks and Caicos. My character's going to go to Turks and Caicos. So she gets around. She doesn't just stay in one place.
Is she always looking at bones and solving a murder mystery?
Well, in each of the books she is. I'm not sure what she does in her off time. She doesn't really contact me when she's not in the book.
You've sort of taken taken her on as a major friend.
There you go.
You have done work that you use your experience in writing your novels. I can't mention all the names of all your novels, but they can obviously go to your website and see the listing. What is that?
It's KathyReichs.com. KathyReichs.com.
Since this is a continuing series, really, about a forensic anthropologist, what kind of new stories are you going to be telling? There's obviously more than just another murder mystery.
I'm always on the lookout for new ideas. I'm lucky in that I am a practitioner. I do this work, and I'm a member of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, and I attend the annual meeting, and I go to all the different sections. There are 9, 10, 11, I forget, sections. There's the pathology section and the forensic dentistry section and the digital and fire and arson and criminalistics. So I go around to all of those and listen to the presentations in all the different areas and sniff around for ideas for new stories. Because each story has to be, there's a core. There's a forensic anthropologist who gets involved and there's a body or remains have been discovered. But each one has to be different. So it has to be driven by a different kind of science, if you will.
The location for the story in Evil Bones was in the southeast part of the United States, the Carolinas, where you are. But you personally have worked even in Guatemala and Central America. Is it different when you go to another country and do forensic anthropological work than in the United States?
There's always difference because there's a different language, for one thing. There's a different culture. I do, not anymore, I'm pretty much retired, but for decades I did all of the work for the province of Quebec in Montreal, in the Central Medical Legal Lab in Montreal.
In Canada?
In Canada, yeah. I did all the work for Quebec province. And I would commute from Charlotte, North Carolina, to Montreal, Quebec. I'd go every 6 weeks, and I did that for like 30 years. So there are some differences in the legal system and the way that functions. There's a little bit of difference in law enforcement and how that functions, but the forensic anthropology really doesn't vary at all. You're working with physical evidence, which I like. You're working with bones, something you can weigh and measure and photograph. That's the kind of data that I like to work with.
You worked in a very sensitive area for the United States, and we call it Ground Zero, with the World Trade Center towers collapsing. Did people like you and others go in and collect all the bones from that situation, or what happened?
Well, I'm a member of something called DMORT, D-M-O-R-T, Disaster Mortuary Operational Response Teams. And these are teams that exist federally throughout the country. Each team corresponds to a FEMA district, roughly, and they exist permanently, but they're only activated in situations involving mass fatalities. So Ground Zero was so huge that whoever could get there, it was hard to get there. There weren't planes flying and, you couldn't rent a car. So, yeah, what we did is everything that was being recovered at Ground Zero was being taken out to the landfill at Staten Island. So I worked part of the time at Ground Zero, but most of the time at Staten Island. And whenever bones would be found, they would bring them to us, the anthropologists, and we would say, yes, that's human, or no, that's animal, because there were a lot of it coming out of that debris because there were restaurants and catering services and whatever in the Twin Towers. So for that disaster, really what we would do is determine if it was human or not, because everything was so fragmentary. And we would assign a case number to it, and then it would be collected and taken to the New York Medical Examiner's Office for later, mostly DNA identification.
Until I read Evil Bones, a Tim Prince Brennan novel, I thought of forensic anthropologists as people joining archaeologists on ancient sites that can date back centuries and looking at bones in the ancient sites that are being dug up and information gathered about previous cultures. Are they still working with archaeologists in those ancient sites, or are forensic anthropologists working in the modern world now?
We are working and always have been working in the modern world. We are not paleoanthropologists. We are not bioarchaeologists. We work with coroners and medical examiners primarily, and we look at modern human remains to address who is it? How do we ID this person? Or what happened to this person? How did they die? Those are the two main questions we look at. Another one might be, well, how long have they been dead? If we are brought to a scene, and this has happened to me, or they're brought to my lab, and I determine that something is more than, 50 years, 60 years dead, it's probably not going to be of forensic interest. There's not going to be charges brought against anyone for homicide or whatever. Yeah, so those are the contexts in which we work, not with ancient remains, not with archaeologically recovered remains. Every now and then I'll get a case that comes to my lab because it's human remains, it's bones, and I'll look at them and determine that they're pre-Columbian or they're prehistoric or Native American or whatever, and then that's the end of it. I turn it over to the archaeologist because that would not be of forensic interest.
I hope everybody goes out and reads Evil Bones, a Temperance Brennan novel. If they enjoy mystery novels, that is normally not what I read, but I had a great time reading your story because you are able to describe conversations and communications and descriptions of places so beautifully. The cover of your book has the skeleton of an animal head. Tell us about it.
The art department at Scribner is fantastic, and they read the book and they take elements from the story and then they come up with several designs which they show to me, and I thought this one was fantastic, so that's where it came from.
Could you summarize the story without giving the ending? Because I read many, many chapters, and quite frankly, it wasn't until the last chapter that I could figure out who did it, because I kept thinking somebody else kept doing it.
You know what? That means I did my job. At the end of the book, I did my job. The goal of every murder mystery author. You can plant red herrings, that's legitimate, but you better tie everything off. All those false leads, you better tie them off, you better explain them. Don't rely on coincidence, and everything has to make sense. And then I think the reader will enjoy, even if they don't. When I read a mystery, if I figure it out before the author tells me the ending, I'm a little disappointed in the author.
You had a killer killing animals, eventually humans, we can say that, and posting grisly bones in natural areas, and there were investigators and your main character trying to figure out who did it, kept following up different leads and having all sorts of personal issues and personal affairs to deal with as well. Characters had different personalities that had to be contended with. You tied it all together to make a story that I thought I was reading a movie script. Is this going to happen?
Well, I've been there, done that. Bones, the TV series, was on air for 12 years, and I did some script writing for that. Yeah, it's different writing for television from writing a novel because the viewer sees all the details, so you don't have to describe what the room looks like or what her dress looks like. It really boils down largely to dialogue.
It does make a difference when you're reading it because you have to describe the locale, the interactions, even what people are wearing, what they might look like.
Right.
Whereas in the movie or the TV, you see it.
Exactly.
Do you ever wish after you finish the novel that you described something differently?
Sometimes I tend not to go back and read them because I'm so tired of them. By the time I finish it, I will have read it 5 or 6 times. Sometimes I'll go back and think, yeah, I really like that scene. Well done, Kathy. And then other times I go back and think, oh no, you probably should have cut this. It's way too long or too much jargon.
But what you did describe was a very good read. I'm so pleased that you informed us of your field in a very modern way so that we have a better understanding what's going on. Thank you so very much for writing your book. Thank you for being my guest.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
I have been speaking with Kathy Reichs, who is a forensic anthropologist and author of over 24 novels, including her most recent book, Evil Bones, a Temperance Brennan novel. I'm Nancy Pearlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Pearlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.